You'll have to give her away, Mom. Amanda's mom is allergic, Owen said, as he stepped over Marbles like she was nothing more than a cushion in the way. I didn't answer right away. The grocery bag I held, just some milk apples, and the cinnamon bread I know Noah likes, suddenly felt like it was filled with bricks. Marbles looked up from her usual spot on the rug, calm as ever, unaware that someone had just spoken about her like she was a problem to be removed. I closed the fridge door with my elbow and set the bag on the counter slowly. Give her away, I asked more to myself than to Owen. He gave a shrug that made my chest tighten. It's just for the week. She can't be around cats, Mom. She'll swell up. Start coughing. You know how it is. No, I didn't. I didn't know how it was to walk into someone else's home and ask them to give away their family. They could stay in the cabin down the road, I said evenly. I can even help pay for it if cost is the issue. Owen looked annoyed. Why would we do that when your place is right here? It's bigger. There's a fireplace, the lake. Of course the lake, the cabin, the Christmas tree I'd already started decorating, the comfort they expected. All of it mine. And Marbles, I asked. He sighed. It's just a cat, Mom. I turned to face him fully, folding my dish towel and setting it aside with care. Marbles rubbed against my ankle, soft and steady. I'll think about it, I said. Owen clapped me on the shoulder and headed upstairs to check the guest rooms, humming like he hadn't just sliced something open inside me. But I already knew the answer, and as Marbles hopped into the chair beside me, curling into the worn cushion, she claimed long ago I knew exactly what I'd do next. A few days before they arrived, I scrubbed every surface twice. Not for them, but for what I planned. I folded the blankets with lavender sachets and stacked extra towels in the hallway closet. I even laid out those holiday mugs Owen used to like when he was little, the ones with snowmen holding mugs of cocoa. Then, just before dusk, I slipped Marbles into her travel crate, lined with a blanket from my bed. She didn't complain. She never did. I walked her across the road to Lyle's porch and tapped on the door. He opened it with a smile and reached for the crate. Just for a couple of nights, I said. He nodded. She'll be safe here. Back home, I pulled the old vacuum bag from under the sink, the one I hadn't emptied since before fall. I dipped 2 fingers in the dust and gently patted a few hairs onto the guest room bedspread, then a bit more under the edge of the living room rug, a soft brushing over the couch cushions. Nothing obvious, nothing careless. I opened the windows and let the cold air rush in, then lit a candle in the kitchen and waited. 2 days later, they arrived. Amanda dragging 2 suitcases, Owen carrying a sleeping toddler, and Colette, Amanda's mother, already pulling tissues from her purse as she crossed the threshold. It's lovely, she said between short, shallow sniffs. So rustic. By dinner, she was sneezing. By bedtime, her eyes were pink, and Amanda was rummaging through their luggage for antihistamines. I brought her a cup of warm water and stood by the door with a knitted throw in my arms. I really did clean thoroughly, I said gently, but the cat lived here a long time. Maybe it just lingers. Colette waved a hand weakly, already half drowsy from the medicine. I turned off the hallway light and walked back to the kitchen. The cushions still held their shape. The guest bed was turned down just the way I left it, and the house, as always, remembered who belonged. Amanda waited until the kids had gone outside their boots, stomping through half-melted snow before she spoke. Couldn't you stay at Lyle's for the week? She asked, sliding a mug of coffee across the table toward me. Her voice was soft, trained, polite in a way that still left bruises. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the mug. It was mine, from my own cupboard. You mean I said finally leave my home? During Christmas, Amanda glanced toward the hallway. It's just Mom's been miserable since we got here. She hasn't stopped sneezing. Owen didn't even look up from his phone. She just wants to be comfortable, that's all. So did I. But I couldn't remember the last time anyone asked me what that meant. I stood and rinsed my cup in the sink. No one followed me. That was the thing with being quiet. People assumed you had nothing more to say. That night, after they went to bed, I zipped up my coat and walked back across the road. Lyle was on his porch with a book and a space heater. "She ready to come home?" he asked. She never wanted to leave. He handed me the crate without another word. Back in the cabin, Marbles sniffed around carefully, her tail twitching as she padded into the hallway. I kept her in my room door, closed food and water by the nightstand. She curled against my hip as I read until the house fell silent. But silence doesn't mean safe. The next morning, I found the bedroom door open. I always closed it. Always. And Marbles was gone. I followed the sound of sneezing down the hallway. Colette's door was cracked. I peeked in just enough to see Marbles curled at the foot of the bed, blinking up at the puffy face of my guest. Amanda stood behind me. She got in, somehow, she whispered, as if the house itself had betrayed them. I didn't answer. I walked past her into the kitchen where the tea kettle was already beginning to hiss. Colette's reaction came fast and dramatic. 1 second, she was sitting up in bed, rubbing her temples, and the next, she was gasping, her face blotchy and red. A rasping cough tore out of her, sharp enough to echo down the hallway. I stood in the doorway, hands resting lightly on the frame, watching her reach desperately for a tissue. Amanda rushed past me, her voice rising with panic. "Mom, breathe. You're okay? Just breathe." Behind her, Owen barreled into the room, and the minute he saw Marbles curled politely at the edge of the blanket, his face twisted. "She's supposed to be gone," he shouted. I kept my tone even. She was. I suppose she found her way home. Marbles hopped off the bed and brushed past his legs on her way to the kitchen, completely unimpressed by the chaos she'd caused. Amanda shot me a helpless look before dragging Owen into the hallway, whispering harshly under her breath. I didn't catch the exact words, but the tone was enough accusation, frustration, something that sounded a lot like blame. Colette muttered something about checking into a motel. She clutched a box of tissues like a life raft. I offered her a glass of water and a cool cloth for her forehead, neither of which she took. In the kitchen, I lifted Marbles onto the stool by the counter. She sat calmly, tail curled around her paws, watching me boil water for tea. Her steady presence grounded the house again in a way no guest ever had. Owen and Amanda left with Colette as the sun dipped behind the tree line, the wind rattling the front door after them. I stayed behind. I didn't turn on the television, didn't pace, didn't rehearse a speech. And as I turned off the kitchen light, I realized there were decisions I no longer felt the need to postpone. The moment their car disappeared down the road, I got to work. I started with the kids' bags, small, light, easy to carry. Then Amanda's suitcase, zipped, but not locked, still full of carefully folded sweaters and a half-used bottle of expensive lotion. Owen's duffel came last, heavier, with shoes and chargers poking out at odd angles. I packed them all with quiet precision, setting them neatly in a row on the covered porch. Then I fetched the diaper bag. The makeup case, even Colette's shawl draped over the arm of the couch. All of it joined the line of luggage outside, waiting for a destination that wasn't mine. Next, I went to the drawer in the sideboard, the one where I kept takeout menus and extra batteries. I pulled out 3 hotel brochures I'd picked up last summer when the grandkids visited. I circled the phone numbers in pen and added sticky notes to each allergy safe. Quiet rooms. Breakfast included. Marbles padded into the hallway as I picked up the phone and dialed. The locksmith answered on the second ring. "How soon can you be here?" I asked. "It's urgent." 45 minutes later, the old lock lay in his tool bag, and a new one clicked solidly into place. I paid in cash and watched him drive off into the night. Marbles had settled back by the fire, her body relaxed and warm. She stretched once, then curled tighter into herself, completely at peace. When the headlights cut through the front windows, I didn't flinch. I stood by the door and waited until I heard Owen's footsteps on the porch. He knocked once, then again. I opened the door just a few inches enough to see Amanda's confused expression and Colette's red eyes peering over a scarf. The cold rushed in. "There's been a change of plans," I said, my voice steady. I thought it best given the circumstances. Amanda stepped forward. First, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "You're kicking us out on Christmas Eve." Her voice wavered between hurt and disbelief. Behind her, Owen didn't bother with the soft approach. "Unbelievable. You waited until we left, then locked us out like we're strangers." I kept my voice calm. "I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm asking you to find accommodations better suited to your guest's needs. You said she was allergic. That hasn't changed." Colette remained in the car seat belt, still fastened her face blotchy, and turned away from the porch. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Amanda's expression hardened. "You could have told us. We would have helped clean. Bought an air purifier. Something." I nodded slowly. "But no one asked if I wanted to remove every trace of my life so someone else could feel more comfortable." Owen took a step closer, jaw tight. "You chose a cat over your own family." I reached into my cardigan and pulled out a small envelope. I handed it to Amanda, along with the hotel brochures she'd barely looked at last night. "There's enough for a couple nights. You'll find decent food at the Greenstone Inn, and they'll put a cot in the room for the kids." Amanda hesitated before taking them. Owen didn't move. "No," I said, finally answering his accusation. "I didn't choose the cat over my family." He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I looked down at Marbles, who sat silently behind the storm door, watching everything with unbothered eyes. Then I met my son's gaze. I chose the one who never asked me to be someone I'm not. No one spoke after that. Amanda turned back to the car. Owen lingered another few seconds, then followed. I stood there until the car backed out of the driveway and disappeared past the curve of pines. Inside, the fire had gone low. I added another log, stirred the embers gently, and returned to the kitchen where the kettle had just begun to whistle. The house had settled into stillness again. No stomping boots. No murmured complaints about the draft in the hallway. No passive sighs from Amanda. Just quiet, the kind that didn't press or expect. I ladled out the last of the squash soup from the pot and let Marbles lick the spoon when I finished. She cleaned it like it was her job, then hopped into the armchair and curled up tight, purring like a warm motor under a blanket. I sat at the table with my bowl and a slice of bread, the good kind from the bakery in town. The same one Owen never noticed, even when I bought his favorite. I ate slowly, listening to the pop and hiss of the fire behind me. It was a cold night, but the warmth inside held steady. After dinner, I brought out the ornament box from the linen closet. I hadn't planned to decorate the tree, but now the silence asked for something gentle. I strung the lights first, white, no blinking, then hung the ceramic stars and birds. Each one went exactly where I wanted. No arguments, no corrections. There were no presents underneath, but I didn't feel the absence. Marbles stretched out on her side, in the armchair, belly exposed, like she trusted the world. I made a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the flakes start to fall in slow, steady swirls. The porch light caught the edges of the suitcases still sitting where I'd left them. I hadn't bothered to bring them in or cover them. Let them decide what to do next. My phone buzzed on the counter. One text, then another. I didn't check them. Not yet. I topped off my tea, added just a splash of cream, and sat back down with my book. Marbles jumped down and joined me, her weight, a small warmth against my leg. I turned a page. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was soft, like being left alone. Finally, by choice. The text came just before midnight. You made your point. Let's talk. I stared at it for a moment, then turned the phone face down on the table. 10 minutes later, it buzzed again. A call this time. Then another. I let them ring. Then the voicemail icon lit up, followed by a message from Amanda. He's trying Delia. Can't you at least meet him halfway? And then not long after my daughter's name appeared on the screen. Claire. The one they always sent when they wanted something. Softened. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the carefully chosen words the tone practiced to make me question myself. I stood and turned off the porch light. The cold outside pressed against the windows, but inside the air was still warm from the fire. I refilled Marble's bowl and sat beside her on the couch, one hand resting gently along her back. We'd made it through worse, she and I. Grief had knocked me down harder than any argument ever could, the kind that hollowed out your chest and made every room echo too loudly. I'd spent winters alone up here that stretched long into April, days without mail, nights where even the power gave up. But Marbles had never left. Not once had she asked me to make space for someone else by erasing myself. Not once had she rolled her eyes when I forgot something. Not once had she asked me to pack a bag and go. She had shown up curled beside me on the darkest nights and stayed when nothing else did. My phone buzzed again. I didn't move. The tea had gone lukewarm in my cup, but I didn't mind. Marbles shifted in her sleep and rested her chin on my leg. I let my fingers move through the thick fur behind her ears. The quiet held. Outside, somewhere down the road, their headlights wouldn't be returning. Not yet. And tomorrow, I'd start thinking about what to do with all the extra space. 2 days passed without another call. The snow came in soft waves covering the steps in a thin hush. I kept the fire going, swept the porch, and boiled broth from scratch. It felt like healing, not performance. When I opened the door that morning, I almost missed the envelope tucked under the mat. Just a small corner peeking out. I recognized Amanda's handwriting on the front. Neat, cautious. Inside was a short note. We're sorry. Colette's fine now. Owen wants to make things right. No accusations, no demands, just a suggestion of peace, like laying down a stone in place of an apology. Beneath the note was a photo, a real print matte finish a little faded at the edges. Me sitting on the dock with baby Owen in my lap. I was laughing, my hair pinned back with a scarf, and the lake shimmered behind us. I remembered that day. The picnic blanket. The sun on my arms. How Owen had fallen asleep in my arms, his tiny hand gripping the collar of my shirt. I'd never felt more needed. I held the photo for a long time, my thumb brushing over the corner. It wasn't pain I felt. Not quite nostalgia either. Just distance. Like I was looking at someone I used to be. I folded the note and the photo together and walked to the drawer by the window, the one I kept old letters in and expired coupons I never threw away. I placed the envelope inside and closed it gently. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had faded. But something else had settled in its place. A kind of clarity. Not cold, just firm. Some lines once crossed don't need to be redrawn. They don't need discussion or repair. They simply need to stay where they are behind you. The porch was still. The cabin quiet. I poured a fresh bowl of water for Marbles and opened the curtains so the light could reach the floors. There were still a few things I wanted to do before the new year. The lake was glass this morning, its edges touched with frost that shimmered under the early sun. I wrapped my shawl a little tighter and stepped onto the porch, careful not to spill the tea in my hands. Marbles was already waiting. She leapt into my lap as I sat settling in without hesitation, her body a warm weight that grounded me more than any conversation ever had. We watched the light rise together, slow and unhurried. I wasn't waiting for anyone. For the first time in a long while, there were no clocks in my head, no invisible schedules or expectations chasing me into the day. Just this moment, this air, the gentle sound of the world waking up. I'd been thinking of repainting the spare room, maybe something lighter, not because anyone was coming to visit, but because I wanted it to feel new, like it belonged to this season of my life, not the last. I might foster another animal. Come spring. Marbles was getting older, and though she still had years in her, I knew she wouldn't mind the company. My phone buzzed on the side table. I glanced at it, let it ring, and turned my gaze back to the water. I didn't need to check. Anyone who really wanted to speak to me could try again later, or write a letter, or knock on the door. If they were willing to meet me where I was, not demand I come to them. Love didn't live in guilt. It didn't shout from the other side of a locked door or appear only when it was convenient. It didn't ask you to shrink. It lived in quiet rooms, in warm laps, in mornings like this where nothing was asked of me except to be exactly who I am. Marbles purred and tucked her chin into the crook of my elbow. I rested my palm on her side, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of her breath. The tea was still warm, and the day mine.